WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on there. I want to thank you for being with us today. We come to you as Star Communications, Star TV, Channel 16, also simulcast on WCLN Radio from Clinton, North Carolina. Also, it's uploaded to all the social media platforms, so folks get an opportunity to review, take a look at, listen to, respond to, and we get a lot of questions on shows that we do, shows that we hope we could do. One of those things that often comes up many times in the questioning box, or can you do this box, is something about technology. Today, we have two people that not only know something about technology, but we have the Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Information and Technology, and also the Chief Information Officer for the state, Jim Weaver. Jim, I want to thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to the conversation.
Also, we have Nate Denny, who is the Deputy Secretary, and he's involved in that whole area for broadband and digital equity. Nate, want to thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, JW. Looking forward to it.
I want to just take a moment to kind of dial folks in so they'll know who we're having a conversation with and a little bit of depth about it. Jim, you've been with this particular Department of State Government since March of this year. After 30 years of experience, so you end up in North Carolina. We could do a whole show on how that happened, but I just thought I'd toss that out. One of the things I thought was interesting is you've led a number of agencies in responsibility for strategic planning, particularly as it relates to IT, delivery of IT services and solutions. You were Secretary and State Chief Information Officer, and this role is critical to North Carolina, but in other roles that you have served as Director of the State CIO at Washington Technology Solutions, these are agencies that are doing something like what we're doing in North Carolina to help connect businesses, industry with people, and create that dynamic of moving forward with technology. You've also been the Chief Technology Officer for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So you've got out-of-state experience as well, and also Chief Technology Officer and Deputy CIO roles in Pennsylvania's Department of Human Services. A couple of other things I wanted to mention very quickly for folks to know about you is that you have received nationally recognized 3 times by the National Association of State Chief Information Officers and twice by Computer World Honors. And you also have numerous certifications with the ITIL, which is the Information Technology Infrastructure Library, which is an internationally accredited organization. Also, one of the things that struck me and we'll kind of get in, maybe touch on is in the conversation today, is you have a broad public service involvement in the fact that you serve in a military. A lot of folks may not know that, but with the National Guard, you've served in multiple states, and now here in North Carolina, I understand you're serving. We're very supportive of our military, as you can imagine. Where I sit, we're right in the middle of 3 of the major military bases in the country. We call them major military bases: United States Marine Corps in Jacksonville, and we got the Air Force in Goldsboro, North Carolina, and of course, nobody will forget Fort Bragg over in Fayetteville. So we salute the military. Thank you for being with us. Nate, I want to touch on your background as well. And you've been there since 2017, and you are, again, the Deputy Secretary. But I thought it was interesting when I look at you, you've got out-of-state experience as well. You were presidential nominee as a U.S. General Services Administrator in Washington, D.C., where you served as Deputy and Chief of Staff as Director of Intergovernmental Affairs and Senior Advisor for Congressional Affairs. You graduated from the University of North Carolina in a place called Chapel Hill, go Tar Heels. Yes, and also you received your Juris Doctorate from the University of Richmond School of Law. I guess we've got a lawyer in our presence today. I feel much better now. And as we move forward, I want to kind of open this as a open discussion today about where we are with technology and how secure we are with technology. And we're going to get into the broadband piece. So, folks, I've opened it up today. I'm going to turn it over now and let the Secretary and Deputy Secretary kind of fill us in on the things that we need to know as folks when we turn on that anticipated spigot we call information, and that information that comes to us through that visual medium. Tell us where we are in North Carolina. And Jim, I'll start with you because you've got all this experience in other states and other organizations. How do we compare with our technology and our movement with technology from states just around us? And Pennsylvania is one of them.
So thanks for that question. And it's interesting. We're very fond of saying that if you've been to one state, you've been to one state. And really, it's very difficult at times to compare and go from state to state because the authorizing environments and the operating environments are radically different. In Pennsylvania, we were a very centralized IT organization under Governor Wolf. That migration, actually in Pennsylvania, we began that journey a year later than what began here in North Carolina. Back in 2015 at the formation of this agency. But we were able to get to an end state that actually has IT optimization and consolidation that has occurred across the entire cabinet of Governor Wolf's cabinet, and really provide a lot of opportunities for savings and elimination of repetitive and duplicative spend. So the governor very easily got $80 million back through not really a lot of hard effort, but just that's how much when you're operating in a decentralized environment, how much repetitive spend that starts to occur when each agency is doing the same thing, and you start multiplying by the size of the state. Washington was radically different. Washington was extremely decentralized, and as you know, things are a little bit done a little bit differently in the West Coast than they are on the East Coast. I'll just put it that way. So it was a totally different experience working for Governor Inslee in the state of Washington. But it was an experience I treasure and I still cherish today because it really, again, gave me that other perspective of how things are being done. And again, too, we began to gravitate and move towards more of starting to look at more of a centralized IT organization, if you will, especially around cybersecurity, because that's an area where you need to look at a whole statewide approach and making sure that the state is securing at all levels of government. And candidly, that was one of the things that was very attractive here in North Carolina, because that's exactly what's in place here today, is that holistic statewide approach of working with all levels of government, whether it's at the city, county, municipality, whatever the case may be, and here at the state. Phenomenal resources that are here at our disposal in North Carolina to look at and address cybersecurity incidents, detection and response. I'm very fortunate to have a very talented National Guard here in the state of North Carolina that's able to respond. I'm very fortunate, and the role that they assigned me here in North Carolina National Guard is actually in that section that oversees those individuals. So at any given time, we have 16 National Guard men and women with what we call boots on ground, working throughout the entire state at all levels of government, doing a vast array of portfolio of services, from doing detection and response to doing vulnerability assessments, all that kind of stuff, working at all levels of government. And even here at the executive branch, we deploy them to go out and help do vulnerability assessments of state agencies. So again, we're able to start getting that idea of what is our current situation, where are our exposures, where are our vulnerabilities, and then more importantly, how do we go about start mitigating or remediating those vulnerabilities? So what we don't want to do is we want to keep raising the bar on cyber. We don't want to see the bar get lowered. And we have to work holistically as an entire state to make sure that we're all moving forward. Unfortunately, since 2017, 2018 timeframe, there has been over 30 plus cyber incidents directed at all levels of government here in the state of North Carolina. 2 weeks ago, we handled over 20 billion, that's with a B, security incidents in an automated fashion. that never materialized anything. But that's how much bad actor traffic is going on, not only in our state, but across the country and across the world. If you look at threat vectors as an example, a lot of the traffic emanates from or originates through United States. Because of people's home PCs that have maybe got corrupted or have malware loaded that the home consumer does not know or is not aware of. And therefore, I mean, they just become another tool or another instrument for the bad actors to go ahead and start doing their nefarious activities. So these are the kind of things as we're looking here. We're fond of saying is that the bad actors only got to be right once. We have to be right all the time. And that's the challenge for government right now as well. And as you've seen with the Colonial Pipeline, as you saw with SolarWinds as well, we have critical infrastructure that is at various stages of a cybersecurity level. We have, water treatment facilities. And some of those incidents, by the way, were targeted at critical control systems that look at water plants, that look at sewage systems. It's not just attacking citizen data, if you will, or looking for those data repositories, but those were attempted ransomware attacks that were thwarted through due diligence and immediate response and corrective actions that were taken. So again, we're very fortunate here in North Carolina how we are able to do some things differently. Are we perfect? No, we have a lot of work to do. One of the things I'm really encouraged by when I look at the House budget that's been proposed, first off, the governor in his budget allocated a $5 million reoccurring spend for us on cybersecurity. The House took that up to $10 million. And that's just phenomenal because there's so many things that we can start doing. This agency has been phenomenal at taking one-time funding opportunities and doing some really good things for the state, but that's not a sustainable operational model. We have to get that reoccurring funding in so now we can sustain those activities over a duration of a time frame. So if you look at a project or an effort over 5 years, we need the ability to sit there and fund and sustain that so we can continue to do more and more. We have our Joint Cyber Task Force in what we call NCDIT, which is the North Carolina Local Government Information Security. I forget what the A stands for.
Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be back in one moment. We'll continue this conversation.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you again for being with us. We have an interesting show today about technology, the leading agency in the state of North Carolina when it comes to technology, the people that's at the top of that lead in that organization. And we have both of them with us today. Secretary Jim Weaver of the North Carolina Department of Information and Technology, and also he's the Chief Information Officer for the state as well. Again, Jim, thank you. Also, I want to reintroduce, as we come back, the Deputy Secretary, Nate Denny. His title involves both broadband and digital equity. As we went to break, Mr. Secretary, you were kind of bringing the subject of an importance of security and technological security to us. And we went to break, you were in this piece of making sure that folks understood that they had kind of a role in this whole process, that sometimes breaches come in from places that you can't imagine they come from, but they can affect tremendously large systems. So I want to let you finish that, and then I want to segue to Nate and let him kind of bring us up to speed. How equity rich are we in North Carolina? Nate, I'll kind of give that to you as soon as we get through with this piece, and then we're going to try to tie the two together.
Yeah, certainly. And thanks again. And where I was talking about was our NCDIT group, which really is our conduit to working with local government. And that composition of that team are local government representatives working with the state to provide that holistic statewide approach. But you brought up a great point. And at the end of the day, cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. And a large preponderance of cyber incidents stem from the fact of social engineering, or what we call phishing attacks. And the fact that folks will click on links, they won't actually take a look to see whether or not it's valid or not. There's always nuances and tricks of the trade to try to fake out of mind. In fact, the other day, I saw something out on a social media site, which was basically pick out the bad URL, and it was Citibank.com. And you know how our minds are trained to look at things, and they see it the way it should look. And the difference was the bad URL, the A in Citibank was Cyrillic. It had the little tail on top of but your eyes were so trained to seeing the letter A. And I knew one of them was bad. That's the only reason I was able to pick it up at the end of the day. But for most folks, they're going to sit there and just see Citibank. And if I'm a Citibank customer, I click on it. And so as we look at the fact that here in our state, we have over 1.1 million households today on the wrong side of the digital divide. And as we're looking at it in integrating and getting all of North Carolina connected to high-speed internet capability, cyber is one of the areas that we really have to focus on at the individual level. And it's something that as we look at our literacy and enablement programs, that cyber needs to be part of that educational process. So with that, I'm actually going to transition over to Nate right now to start talking about some of the exciting things that he has going on within his deputate around literacy and enablement and broadband in particular. So Nate.
Absolutely, Nate. And if you will, let's continue your commentary into this equity piece too. I want to make sure we touch on that.
Sure, JW, thanks. Secretary Weaver, appreciate it. Let's start with the definition of what digital equity means, right? Digital equity is the state at which every household, every community in North Carolina would have full access to high-speed internet, the ability to take advantage of it, and the tools necessary to fully participate in the digital economy. So, if we start with kind of where North Carolina is, we know that according to the FCC's data, federal data, about 95% of North Carolina households allegedly have access to high-speed internet. But the FCC's data overstates that level of connectivity. That 95% would be second best in the Southeast, basically. So, pretty good relative to a lot of our neighboring states. Mm-hmm. But the way the FCC calculates the data, if a single household in a given census block has access to the internet, they count the whole census block as served, right? So we know that there are many households in every census block in the state that don't have access. So the rates of disconnectedness are actually much higher than that federal data would suggest. Secretary Weaver mentioned that 1.1 million households in North Carolina are on the wrong side of the digital divide. About a third of those don't have access, right? They can't subscribe if they want to and if they can afford it. About half of them can't afford it, right? So even if you've got a line running by your house, you still have to be able to afford the high-speed internet access to engage with the world around you. And many more don't have the digital literacy skills you would need, or maybe don't have a computer at home or even a smartphone at home, and thus can't access the internet. I think an important thing to know is that COVID has really brought all this to the forefront. Right. This was a problem before COVID, mm-hmm. But when we all started trying to work from home, our kids started having to learn from home. We started having to try to take advantage of telemedicine services instead of going into a doctor's office, or even trying to apply for a job. Right. Because this isn't just a public health crisis we've been working through. It's also an economic crisis. So the high-speed internet access and adoption are key to all of those, right? And I think we've got a once-in-a-lifetime challenge, I think, to try and meet the need out there on high-speed internet. I think the important thing is that we also have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to address the challenge once and for all. So Governor Cooper's proposed a $1.2 billion plan to close that digital divide and fully achieve that digital equity state that we referenced at the top. And that's by funding infrastructure deployment so that 98% of North Carolina households have a high-speed fiber connection at home. It's addressing affordability, right? Right now, too many North Carolinians would have to spend more than 2% of their monthly income to afford the $60 average internet cost per month. And so we've got to address that challenge. And we've got to make sure that folks have the digital literacy training and tools they need, again, to fully access the digital economy.
One of the things that struck me is, as you were talking, is that there seems to be two components to that, and that's the accessibility and the affordability. And there's a lot of work. I know with Star Communications, there's an aggressive effort to get fiber to homes in some of our most rural areas that would never have had this happen before. We were very fortunate recently to have a $23.7 million grant to help push that forward. Is that part of where that money is going? And how do you stage it, Nate, in the sense of delivering that to folks in rural areas? Oftentimes, folks will say, well, what I need that for? And listen, I live in a rural area. Somebody asked me, I said, well, I live in the woods, so I can talk about the woods. So the thing is, folks will look at you and go, listen, I got a tube TV. What am I worried about fiber for? But it's one of those things, they might not see it right now, but it's affecting their life, whether they have it or not. It's impacting their life. Is that a reasonable approach?
Well, I think it gets back to the question of digital literacy and the ability to kind of relate one's life back to full participation in the digital economy today. Again, we're having to learn from home, work from home,
healthcare from home.
Absolutely. Our doctor's offices and emergency rooms are full right now, right? And so the ability for my kid's pediatrician to be able to meet with us online on a setting like this, right? And check out how my daughter's feeling without someone coming into the office and potentially spreading, whether it's COVID or just a common cold. I think that's a really key, a key attribute right now, and something I think we need more investment across the board. You mentioned the infrastructure piece, and you mentioned Star. Star has been an active participant both in federal grant programs and in the state programs. I think of the governor's $1.2 billion plan, which is taking advantage of the funding the state's already gotten from the federal American Rescue Plan. About half of that would be investment in deploying infrastructure or incentivizing private internet providers to extend their networks so that more people have access. We've got the state's existing GREAT grant program that issues great grants for providers who can connect rural parts of the state. This plan would open up more counties to that program and let us incentivize projects at even higher speeds so that we're not just hitting kind of the bare minimum of what constitutes broadband, right? Which is a 25 megabits per second download speed and 3 megabits per second upload speed, which is super technical. But where we're going now, again, if my kids are learning from home and my wife and I are both trying to do work conference calls with the boss here, then, we need much higher speeds than that, right?
Yeah, I think it gets back to expectations.
JW, can I interject there?
Yeah, sure.
The question that you're asking as to why do we need to do this and why is this important to rural North Carolina? We got to go back and think that at one point in time, many of us remember a booming business called Blockbuster. And this upstart called Netflix, that Netflix was begging Blockbuster to buy them out. And Blockbuster had the approach that people like coming to our stores, people like looking at the tapes and doing that kind of thing. What happened? Blockbuster became irrelevant. Netflix is now, and you just continue to look at all the streaming media services that are out there now. There's probably a new one every so many days that's popping up. When you start thinking about, as Nate was talking about, rural healthcare, we don't necessarily, our rural healthcare system does a great job. They're not necessarily as robust as some of the urban centers. So the access to telemedicine, telehealth.
When we come back from break, we'll pick up on that. We'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned.
At home or away, knowing who is at your door is priceless. Star Communications is here to help with its doorbell security camera by Skybell. Live viewing and two-way audio equips you with the ability to always see and greet anyone that shows up at your door. If this is the kind of confidence you are looking for, call Star Communications today at 1-800-706-6538 to learn more about this intelligent security that you can always depend on.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're talking with Secretary Jim Weaver. Jim is the Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Information and Technology, and he is also the Chief Information Officer for the state. We also have Deputy Secretary here, Nate Denny, with us that it focuses on broadband and digital equity. Mr. Secretary, I want to go back to your kind of final closing comments there as we had to take a quick break, kind of a hard break. But I want to go back to that, this whole idea of the critical importance and impact of technology literally on everyone. And I want to let you pick up from there and start on that piece.
Yeah, thank you. Where I was going, as we talk about the impact of technology for our rural healthcare system, I think this is a critical piece. High-speed internet connectivity. We were talking about medical sensors, personal medical sensor devices, if you will, that people can wear that can now be monitored remotely at either their local healthcare provider, even more importantly, maybe from a major urban hospital or hospital system. This is critical stuff. So we don't necessarily have to have patients driving to a hospital anymore. They can now engage online with medical professionals. Our rural healthcare system can engage with more urban or metropolitan areas to get to a higher degree of level of expertise or specialization, if you will, across the board. And then likewise, when I was in the little town of Baden on Saturday, as they were announcing 630 households now receiving 1 gig symmetrical capability, we talked a lot about the agriculture industry. And the impacts that technology has in the agriculture. So when we talk about sensor devices, looking at soil samples, looking at the health of crops, the health of livestock, even getting to the point now of autonomous farm vehicles, if you want to think of it from that aspect, right? How could that type of activity help a thriving farm type environment? And again, my grandfather back in the day had a 100-acre farm. So I know the amount of hard work and labor that goes into it. And it took the entire family, an extended family, to make that farm successful. Think about today, how technology would have revolutionized all that hard work that was going on before. And so I think these are the types of examples that are out there. That at the end of the day, broadband is just as critical as it is that road, that bridge that's connecting communities. Broadband is the new highway to connect communities a lot differently. We have a lot of tourists that come to our state, and the mountains are beautiful here in North Carolina, and they want to travel and be part of that economic system. They're looking for broadband. They're looking for that high speed connectivity. I don't, and maybe Nate knows the statistics on this, but we also in our rural areas have a lot of mom and pop businesses, small town businesses that could thrive and sell their products by getting connected to the digital highway. And I forget what the percentage is of what that would mean for tax revenue at all levels of government as well. And then lastly, when you think about real estate value and property value, that, again, today, most people would, if they had to choose between a house on this side of the street that had high speed connectivity and this side of the street that had nothing, I know which direction I would go on. And so that's becoming part of the decision factor as people are looking at this crazy real estate market right now, things that help differentiate and enable families to make different decisions.
Nate, I think that's a great comparison between the digital highway versus actual roads and that kind of thing. So when we think about this infrastructure need and the funding for infrastructure, the infrastructure for technology is as critical, and in some cases probably more critical, because the technology is going to touch more people immediately that are in dire straits right now, and particularly as it relates to healthcare and education. We're looking at going back again to a school system that is looking at possibly some of them may even have additional layoffs as a result of COVID. This whole thing is going to be a continuum. How do we continue to educate people of the need and the vital access need for everyone in the state? Are we doing as good a job as we can? Is there other things we need to do?
JW, that's a great question. I think as Secretary Weaver said, high-speed internet access, this form of infrastructure ties back to everything we do, right? To the schools, the businesses, healthcare providers, totally critical to just modern life, right? But so there's an infrastructure piece of the problem, but there's also a lot of work we need to do on that affordability side, on the training side, right? And I think that's why the governor's plan focuses so much on the notion of digital equity, on digital literacy as a goal in itself. Not only are we going to get 98% of North Carolina households access, but we're going to make sure that 80% of North Carolina households are subscribing to high-speed internet. And the only way we can do that is by addressing the cost issue, right? We want to make sure, too, that it's not just an 80% average across the state. We want to make sure that we are putting in the work and targeting our investments so that 80% threshold is hit across racial demographics, right? Right now, about 76% of white households in North Carolina have a subscription to the internet. Black, Latino, and Native American households lag pretty far behind that, right? So we've got to do the work to make sure that we're addressing those community needs as well. And then, you were talking about education. Our goal is to make sure that 100% of North Carolina households with school children have a subscription to high-speed internet as well, right? You've probably heard the term homework gap, right? So many of our schools are moving away from hard textbooks like we had in school and are doing assignments online. And if you get an assignment online, but you don't have a computer at home, you can't keep up, right? So we want to get rid of that homework gap once and for all. The other thing I'll say about that is, again, we don't want to just focus on the infrastructure side of it. And so that's why we at the department and under the governor's leadership have created a new Office of Digital Equity and Literacy, which is the first of its kind in the country. And that team will work on making grants to communities and building strong partnerships, developing training, helping folks in low-income households get devices, get actual laptops or tablets so that they can access the services we're all talking about. That training, and if I can circle back to Secretary Weaver's point, that training has to incorporate cybersecurity. It has to incorporate privacy, right? Because if we're giving everybody a high-speed connection and we're saying go forth and participate in the digital economy, we need to make sure they know what the risks are as well and how they can be good stewards and behave safely in the digital economy.
It seems part of that too is the education of educators, if that even makes sense. I guess, but my point is we've got teachers and so forth in public schools and public education, as well as in colleges, maybe that has been there 20, 30 years. And many of those folks, or some of them I know, and they look at me and go, wait, I have to go back and really figure out what I'm doing here if I'm going to teach online. But the online expectation's there. So I think everybody's getting it, that we got to get up to speed. We've got to do that. So are we doing enough to educate the educators? Either one of you, I'd toss that out.
I think it's a work in progress, right? I think we're all adjusting to kind of a new set or new scale of interactions online, right? And I think, look, in a crisis, right, we have an opportunity, right, to change how we all interact and change how we all view technology's role in our lives. I know we work really closely with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction to make training available, but if you look at the number of teachers across the state, that's a lot of folks who are interacting with the system. And, to Secretary Weaver's earlier point, if one person gets a spammy email or clicks on the wrong link, you've got a lot of resources that are vulnerable there. So that education function for teachers, I mean, really for our department across the state is really critical.
I want to kind of, and we've just got a couple of minutes here, Jim, but I want to come back to you. How important is it, and are the cooperatives like STAR throughout the state of North Carolina, are they stepping up to carry a lot of the weight to getting the fiber in the ground throughout the state? Is that one of the vehicles that's been beneficial that you see throughout North Carolina?
Yeah, so I know we're going to be coming up probably on your break here soon. So
we'll just follow through then.
Okay, so let me start with your question this way. So there's a great series that's produced by a university or California University called Did You Know? And I played for our staff here the 2006 version, in which it listed the United States as far as broadband investments back in 2006, they were number 17 globally. And Luxembourg just passed us on the amount of investment in broadband. Fast forward 15 years now to where we're at today, and I bet that number is not that much different. When you look at our European partners and other countries that have really dove into high-speed internet connectivity, when you look at high-speed rails, public transit, all that type of stuff. And so we are counting on our partners here. This is not something that we at the state can just do by ourselves. This is not something that local government can do by itself. It's going to take all of us to make this a success. This is a statewide problem. We need all state resources and all of the state's capabilities to enable this fundamental opportunity that's here, not only in our state, but across the country as well.
Yeah, I think the technology piece is going to be a continuing driving factor as we look at the future. And my big thing is, again, trying to get this education out to as many people as possible, because the support comes in when everybody makes the same sound and tries to get positive results. So when we come back from this break, I want to kind of fill in some blanks, maybe that are key questions that also need to be asked. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be back in one moment.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from STAR. STAR has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from STAR. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Last segment coming up, we're talking with the Secretary of North Carolina Department of Information and Technology, Jim Weaver. We're also talking to Deputy Secretary Nate Denny. Gentlemen, we've had a great discussion. This is the last segment coming up. We've talked off air about so many things we want to get in. Quite frankly, I'm going to say to both of you, let's try to get the key points in on this last segment with the idea, and I'll go ahead and put this out to folks, that you have already been given an invitation to come back at some later date, and we're going to continue this. I see this as an evolving conversation. There's going to be nuances coming up that we can't imagine. We've talked about security. We've talked about broadband connectivity. We've talked about equity. I'm going to segue, I think, to you, Mr. Secretary. And Jim, if you could just kind of start on the critical information right now that you want to make sure people get in this last segment. And then I want to give Nate a moment to talk about some of the ways folks may be able to save some money and some other things. But I'm going to give you the microphone to start with.
Well, certainly. And again, I got to go back to Governor Cooper. When he talks about North Carolina, he's got 4 goals for North Carolina. And that's a prosperous North Carolina, an educated North Carolina, a healthier North Carolina, and an equitable North Carolina. And when you think about those 4 goals, a core component or ingredient of that is high-speed internet connectivity. And it's quite obvious that we're doing something right here in North Carolina. As we were talking in the break, there's a number of high-tech industries coming to North Carolina. And why are they coming to North Carolina? Because we have an infrastructure that's in place they can readily plug into. We have a willing, trained, educated, and capable workforce here in North Carolina that can engage and fulfill the needs of these companies. What is the long-term impact if we leave 10% plus of our population behind because they're not able to get on the digital highway? We can't let that happen. We can't let that happen from an education aspect. We can't let that happen from an industry perspective. We need to make sure that all North Carolina is able to get connected, be a part of the digital highway, and engage differently than what we have done traditionally here. We're at a transformational moment here in our state's history. This is generational impact that we're talking about. I don't think that this state has ever seen a budget surplus that exists like today here in North Carolina. We have numerous opportunities coming from the federal government. 5.5 billion at least in ARP funds that are coming, which is part of the 1.2 billion that Nate referenced that the governor wants to redirect towards broadband infrastructure. There's other congressional legislation that's in place right now that would probably direct another 100 million towards North Carolina. And then even more importantly is the continuation of something we talked about earlier, and I know Nate's going to touch on this, is the emergency broadband benefit. The continuation of that program, so it helps address affordability. But we cannot afford to allow our workforce get left behind. And so this is why now is the time for us to do these things. We got the ability, we got the funding, we got the resources. We just got to now go and make this stuff happen. And so I'm hoping that we soon have a state budget, because that's where these funds are going to come through to us. But I'm also concerned here that 29 states are already in front of us. 29 states have already engaged since July in doing stuff across the broadband platform or spectrum. And we can't be put in a position where North Carolina is competing for others to get access to fiber, get access to basic work skills like folks digging trenches and trying to lay fiber. I know there's a number of large scale telecommunications providers that are in dire need of workers doing splicing of fiber, all kinds of things. This is a once in a generational opportunity here for us in North Carolina to do something different. And we need to go ahead and make that opportunity occur. I'll let Nate talk a little bit more about some of the opportunities with the emergency broadband and how that helps get people subscribed and connected. So Nate,
it's all yours.
Well, thank you. You know, you mentioned, Secretary Weaver, the 28 states that are also using federal funds to go big on broadband right now. I think the benefit we've got in North Carolina is that Governor Cooper's produced the largest and most comprehensive plan for investing in broadband access, affordability, and digital literacy of any state. And we spent a lot of time talking to other states about what they're doing. The second thing we've got going for us is that right now, and Secretary Weaver mentioned, the ongoing budget discussions. Right now, we've got a shared bipartisan commitment to making these investments. Everyone realizes, in part thanks to COVID, everyone realizes how urgent this need is and how unique the opportunity we've got. You know, to tie back to the earlier discussion around Apple and other companies coming to North Carolina, we're going to have a workforce challenge, right? They're coming here because North Carolina has the talent to add value, and we've got to make sure that everyone has a chance to get the training they need to fully compete for those jobs, for all those new jobs. And that'll only happen if you can afford the internet, right? So Secretary Weaver mentioned the FCC's emergency broadband benefit. JW, if you can throw a link on the screen, I think it'll be really useful for your viewers to go to getemergencybroadband.org. And that's where you can find out if you're eligible for that benefit. It's a $50 a month subsidy that goes toward the cost of a high-speed internet subscription. And the Governor Cooper has asked all of the state's internet providers to participate in that program. A great many of them have, and we're grateful for that work, because we're going to have to work together to make sure everyone has that opportunity. So if you go to that getemergencybroadband.org website, find out if you're eligible, sign up. we're actively in competition with other states to get the most signups now. So we're hoping to keep moving forward and overtake some of the even larger states that already have a lot of signups.
First come, first serve kind of on that. When the money's out, it's gone. So.
Well, there was an initial, in the CARES Act, there was an initial $3.2 billion investment in that program. Like I said, the emergency broadband benefit. The infrastructure package that the U.S. Senate just passed and that we hope the U.S. House will pass and that President Biden will sign in the very near future devotes another $100 million to states like ours for broadband infrastructure, but also extends that program. It gets rid of the word emergency, in fact, because it makes clear this isn't just a momentary need, right? This is going to be an ongoing need. So we're hopeful that program will continue to get federal funding and that North Carolinians will continue to have the opportunity to reduce their internet costs.
Yeah, so JW, currently today, as of Monday, we have over 172,000 households in North Carolina that are already registered for that program. So we're number 6 in the nation as far as overall states, as far as level of participation. As Nate said, the competition, type A personality, I'm sorry. But, again, when you think about California, Texas, and Florida, and New York, it's hard to compete against those 4 large populous states, but Ohio's still ahead of us as well. And Ohio has been extremely successful in getting, there are over 250,000 people or households in the state of Ohio registered for this. So we know we can do more. And again, any help along those lines. The other area that would be very beneficial for us, and Nate, if you could also, we can get that link to you, JW, is around our speed test. Data is key here. How we make decisions, where we look at investment opportunities, we really need to understand what the current landscape really looks like. And so that's those speed tests and getting those results back to us so we can actually see what's going on holistically across the state is of paramount interest to us as well.
And explain just quickly the speed test thing. Tell us exactly what that is.
You
Sure.
want to take that one?
Secretary, I'll chime in here. So, earlier we were talking about data and mapping and how many North Carolinians don't have access. I mentioned that FCC data that it overstates how many people have internet access. What we've done at the department to try and get better data and figure out, like Secretary Weaver said, how we can make smarter investments is offer a speed test tool so that you can go in, put in your address, and take a speed test, figure out if you're getting internet service as strong as is advertised by your provider. Mm-hmm. That data point helps us have a better picture of who's served, who's unserved, and who's underserved. You can find that map at ncbroadband.gov. That's our website, and it says find out how fast your internet is. And go in, again, enter your address. We've also got a phone number you can call listed on that the website, and we'll make sure that your team has the number to put up on the screen if you don't have high-speed internet, right? So that you can let us know that you don't, so that we can figure out how to get you service.
We've got about a minute and a half left. I'm going to kind of, divide this up. Mr. Secretary, about 30 seconds, just kind of something that we've missed is a critical nugget that you want to make sure we get out in this segment.
Well, one of my goals here for the state of North Carolina is to really start looking at a digital transformation. And that is, how do we start engaging our residents and our businesses and our tourists differently? And so we spent a lot of time today talking about one pillar of that, which is around connectivity. But we also need to talk about cyber. We need to talk about privacy. We need to talk about cloud. But more importantly, we need to start understanding our residents and what are they coming to engage us for in government, and truly be digital, not be online, but be digital and look at it from their side of the table, not necessarily our side of the table. So I'm sure that could be an opportunity for a future discussion.
Nate, about 15 seconds.
I think we've got a unique opportunity here. We've hit on it, but we really need to drive home. We've got a huge influx of federal funds and unappropriated state balances. We've got the resources to make the investment and help people get that access and afford to sign up.
Want to thank both of you for being with us today. And of course, we'll go ahead and invite you back. And hopefully next time we'll be in studio. We won't necessarily be Zoom, although Zoom is a piece of technology that I've become dependent on. So thank you for being with us, ladies and gentlemen. We thank you for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you again next week right here. And as always, we look at you in that screen and we say, may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.